At the Auckland War Memorial Museum, there is a permanent gallery called Arts of Asia. We take a look at some of the stories behind the items on display.
For 150 years, the Auckland War Memorial Museum has been home to a huge collection of items spanning human history. Today we look at its Arts of Asia gallery, its beauty, style and some of the stories behind the items.
It starts in Persia, in the Middle East, because that was the hub of the world. That was where all the exchanges and the transmission of ideas occurred. So we start in Persia and then we go all the way through India, through Southeast Asia, through to Japan, China and Korea, where our biggest collections of Asian material is. You can define a culture through ceramics. That's the only thing that will survive, and that's the thing that remains about every civilization. It's a pretty nice way to be remembered, because they were making pretty fantastic things. Even ordinary everyday wear is extraordinary in terms of the information that it holds and the ability of what people were able to do with very simple techniques and make extraordinary works. And I think that's one of the things that we forget about these days, when everything is mass-produced and has very little sense of the making involved in it.
This beautifully crafted porcelain Chinese figure, made in the 18th century, is called Guanlin, or the Goddess of Mercy.
She's about peace and serenity and the purity of form because of the whiteness of the clear glazed porcelain. And that was taken on by the Western audience to think of her as being like the Virgin Mary. So when they were exported to Europe especially, people picked up on that idea of her looking like Mary, or the Goddess of Mercy.
The basement of this building houses such a huge, priceless collection, it cannot be displayed in its entirety. Rotating items keeps the displays fresh and relevant.
We're down in the basement storage.
Many of the items are donated by members of the public who want to share an item they own with the wider community. This 300-year-old inkwell, carved from river stone, was donated by a Chinese migrant who now calls Auckland home.
Because he was a new immigrant, there are all those mixed emotions of being in a new place and in a new time, in a very new, different culture. And by placing this object in the collection, I think what I responded to was that notion that to become part of Auckland, or to become part of New Zealand, to give over this gift was an extraordinary and deeply felt occasion.
This shawl was made in Kashmir. It travelled the Silk Road to the courts of Europe. An item like this graced the shoulders of the Queen of England, so cementing its popularity.
When you look at the shawl closely, you can see that it's not only a beautiful piece of plain blue woven cashmere wool. And these shawls hit the French court or the Parisian fashion streets in the 1840s, and they became one of the major fashion items to wear. And Queen Victoria, who was a young queen, she saw them and she took them over to England, and then they became a huge fashion item in England. And so because of that, the people who were making them in India couldn't keep up. But the people who were weaving in Paisley in Scotland saw these and decided there's a market for them, so they would start weaving them as well.
From Kashmir to Scotland, China to the courts of Europe, trade and travel have caused cultures to collide and so influence each other in function and design.
The more that museums engage people in an actively passive way of interacting with different cultures and different aspects of different people's cultures, then you get an understanding of why we're here and where we've all come from. We learn about, through different things, aspects of ourselves that are common or are different, but it creates a different sort of understanding.
You can view the Arts of Asia gallery daily. It is a permanent display at the Auckland War Memorial Museum.
Well, that's all for this week. You can watch our program online at www.tvnz.co.nz, keyword Asia Downunder. And if you have any community notices, you can send them to asiadownunder@extra.co.nz. Till next week, ka kite anō.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.